The fundamental cause of the trouble is that in the modern world, the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt. Russell wrote this quote when the German Nazi Party was rising to power in 1933, but it's dramatically relevant today, because that explains why there's so much noise around us. Why those with nothing useful to say shout, while those with something valuable stay silent, and why nuance gradually loses to the loudest outburst online. The answer lies in our culture's paralyzing intellectual humility, the tendency to assume you're not qualified enough to say what you know. In 1999, two psychologists at Cornell, David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger, ran a series of experiments. They tested people on logic, grammar, and humor, then asked them to estimate how well they performed compared to others. The results were striking. People who scored at the bottom 12th percentile estimated themselves to be around the 62nd percentile. They weren't just wrong, they were wrong while being confident they were right. Meanwhile, the top performers underestimated themselves. They assumed everyone else found it just as easy as they did. Dunning and Kruger called this a double curse, meaning that not only do people with limited knowledge reach wrong conclusions, but their incompetence robs them of the ability to realize it. They don't know enough to realize they don't know enough. But what people often miss is a second curse that hits the competent. When you understand something deeply, become aware of all the nuances, the edge cases, the exceptions, you develop what some philosophers call epistemic or intellectual humility, a silencing awareness of the limits of your own knowledge. Here is a brief case from my life. My friend is a professional vocalist with years of training and technically excellent skill. Once she ranted on social media about people who can barely hold a note and constantly post videos of themselves singing, expecting praise and getting it. Meanwhile, she wouldn't post a recording if she heard a single imperfect note in her own performance. One could call this unnecessary perfectionism, but the issue lies in another nuance. The untrained singers don't hear their own mistakes. They lack the ear to detect them, so they post with complete confidence, while the trained singer hears everything, every tiny deviation from the ideal, so she hesitates, edits, deletes, and stays silent. And it is a much bigger problem today than you may think, because then we get a world where experts are literally blocked by their own skill and knowledge. There are several reasons why this block happens among experts. Based on the Dunning-Kruger research, the first reason is the conviction that if you understand something, everybody does. That if you find something obvious, it's obvious to everyone. Except it isn't. Things that took you years to learn can feel like common sense now, but it's only common sense to you and others who have similar education and experience. So experts stay silent on the things that less knowledgeable people most need them to explain. Ideas that seem self-evident to a rational, educated mind can easily be invisible to those who haven't done the same cognitive work. Assuming everyone just knows what you know is to overlook the fact that reason must be exercised, and that the products of your mind are earned, not universal. The second reason is skepticism, the belief that we can never really know anything. So even when educated people see something dangerously wrong, they think, well, it's more nuanced than that, as far as we know, but we don't really know anyway. It's just our best guess. However, this statement, we can't be certain of anything, is itself a claim to certainty. If we can't know anything, how do we know that? Skepticism relies on a stolen concept, using knowledge to deny knowledge. Skepticism steals the very thing it claims doesn't exist. Third, subjectivism. The belief that there is no single truth, only my truth and your truth. So thoughtful people see bad ideas spreading and think, that's their truth. Mine is different, but there's no point arguing about it. However, when rational people stop defending objective truth, they leave the floor to shape the modern culture to those who assert their views as universal truth anyway, just without or with distorted evidence. Fourth, perfectionism. Knowledgeable people often have an ideal in their head, a standard they believe they should reach, and they're not willing to accept anything less. So instead of sharing something imperfectly structured but valuable, they share nothing at all. Excellence is important, but action is no less important. Perfectionism leads to paralysis, but a rational person recognizes that an imperfect contribution is worth infinitely more than a perfect one that never gets made. The fifth and the last reason: thoughtful people often fully acknowledge that complex ideas don't usually fit into TikTok, Instagram, or tweets. Like, why bother? Our voices will just drown in the noise anyway. But it's precisely withdrawal from the conversation because it's too noisy that ceds the floor to irrationality. It's about quality over quantity when it comes to the audience you reach in this case. I completely get thoughtful people who don't want to take part in all that noise, but we really need you visible. We need you creating stuff and sharing it with people. That's the only way not to lose the next generation and to ensure more pleasant worlds for us. I would be really glad to have a separate word like Gold's Gulch from Atlas Shrugged, a hidden valley where the irrational minds withdrew from an irrational world. But since we're all staying here under the same sky, please don't underestimate your worth and possible impact. Fear of being wrong publicly or imposter syndrome can also enter the conversation, but these are both derivatives of the same root, the assumption that one at least might be wrong. When nonsense goes unchallenged long enough, it becomes just what everyone knows. Ayn Rand saw this pattern play out in a finite form of rational minds staying silent. She talked a lot about the idea that dictatorships don't need supporters as much as they need non-objectors, or those who silently stay out of politics. People who disagree but doubt and stay quiet are more useful to an authoritarian system than active protesters are damaging, because there are significantly more of the former. Her whole philosophy gets debated endlessly, but she made a point that's hard to argue with. Do not keep silent when your own ideas and values are being attacked. If a dictatorship ever comes to this country, it will be by default of those who keep silent. We are still free enough to speak. Do we have time? No one can tell. She was sure that the window for speaking up was much shorter than people assume. By the time it's obvious we should have said something, the opportunity to say it freely may have passed. That's why she always encouraged people to take the most of freedom when they have it, because she saw how quickly "I'd rather not get involved" becomes "I'm not allowed to be involved." Every time a thoughtful person stays quiet because they are not sure enough or sure that they cannot be sure, the floor gets ceded to someone who's sure about everything and wrong about most of it. That's why we have such an amount of noise on the internet. Smart people are so much more prone to have self-doubts and be skeptical of what they want to say. This is what I call the sin of intellectual humility. Smart people may mistakenly take intellectual humility as a virtue, like don't ramble about some nuances you might be wrong about. But the actual virtue is intellectual honesty, admitting what you don't know, but also recognizing when you've done the work to understand the chosen topic and have something valuable to say. That intellectual humility may be a beautiful trait when it protects you and others from your mistakes. But if you're right, if you understand something that others are getting dangerously wrong, then your silence serves the overconfidence, misinformation, and the slow degradation of the world we are living in. So, what does this mean for you? If you're someone who thinks carefully, values evidence, acknowledges complexity, and traces close to long-term consequence, the world needs to hear from you. Start with topics you already know deeply. Your obvious insights aren't obvious to everyone. Share and see how many people value your explanations. Don't restrain yourself with perfect. A thoughtful, imperfect contribution is worth more than a perfect contribution that never gets made. Right now, the people showing up most consistently are the ones least burdened by doubt. Your hesitation is evidence of your thoughtfulness. Don't let it become your silence. Speak up to improve your own environment.